Hello and welcome to a brand new day of free-to-play here on Magic the Gathering Real Life. Get the dish on the latest with me, Lord Rumfish. I made an entire Magic set, 281 cards, called Wastes of Veldmar. And we've been going through it. The first video I introduced the color factions and the rules primer. We've just been going card by card, color by color. This is green. Let's jump into it. We get to start on a Mythic Rare this time. It says Ancient Hydra Engine. So it's 6 mana, green and 5 colorless. It is a 6/6 artifact creature Hydra. It has Bulwark 6, which means whenever this creature attacks, it gets +0/+6 until end of turn. So it attacks as a 6/12. And it has Ward 6, which is about the same as Hexproof. It's a stupid number to have on a card. I'm not going to argue about that. But it fit with the theme of having 6 of the number 6 on this card. So here it is. Also, when Ancient Hydra Engine enters the battlefield, you gain 6 life. And when Ancient Hydra Engine dies, create 6 1/1 green snake artifact creature tokens with Bulwark 1 and Ward 1. So the Hydra breaks apart into its 6 heads, which all act independently as snake creatures. So if it wasn't for that bit at the end, I would think this is a little too clunky to be a Mythic Rare. But with turning into 6 1/1s when it dies on top of the other things it does, I think that is enough to push it up to being Mythic. It's weird. It's especially weird that it doesn't have some ability like Reach or Trample. I get it. Super strange card, but got some utility in terms of being hard to target, gaining your life, and breaking apart into a bunch of chump blockers and go wide attackers. So, and also that feeling of strangeness about the card helps contribute to it feeling like it's from a weird old era of technology that predates the current eras of technology. You might have seen that a lot of Veldmar has a steampunk kind of aesthetic to it, like an ether punk, steampunk kind of look. This is different. These are some ancient stone and crystal devices that were built before all of this current stuff. Archaic Worm Engine. This is another piece of old technology. So this is an 8/8 for 8. It's an uncommon worm, artifact creature. It has Bulwark 3 and Trample. So it attacks as an 8/11 Trampler. And when this enters the battlefield, you banish 2. Right, that's exile the top 2 cards of your library. Gain 4 life, then draw 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. So this has a ton of value baked into it from that ETB trigger. So whether or not it sticks on the battlefield, you've gained 4 life and you've drawn 2 extra cards. And presumably you ate up an opponent's removal spell at the same time. So, it doesn't have maybe quite as much punch as like a Palaka Worm, but it does, draw you more cards than a Palaka Worm. It's bigger than a Palaka Worm. I don't know. And it's easier to splash. So, all that being said, I don't know that it sees any constructed play, but it's a very good payoff if you get to 8 mana or you're able to pull an artifact creature straight out of your library to the battlefield somehow in Limited. Bitter Treefolk. This is a 5/4 Treefolk at common for 5 mana. It has Bulwark 2 and Trample. So it attacks as a 5/6 Trampler. Not bad. Blocks as a 5/4, and that's okay too. And the treefolk of this realm are not very happy. Forests and trees and such have not fared very well on Veldmar. Bloody Brawl. This is a green sorcery for 1 green. It's a common. Target creature you control gets +2/+0, then it fights target creature an opponent controls. If one or more of those creatures die this way, create a blood token. So, because it's a fight spell and it doesn't pump toughness at all, it is somewhat likely that one of the creatures could die. At the very least, if you're doing this spell, you should be killing the opponent's creature. So most of the time you're going to get a blood token off of this, which, helps with the artifact themes, helps with, card filtration and all of that. So, bite spells are better than fight spells, but this is one that leaves you with a little bit of extra value. And if your creature survives and it's able to attack with 2 extra power, that's good too. Coffin Root Treefolk. This is a 2/4 for 3 mana. It's a green uncommon. The first time you sacrifice a creature each turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on Coffin Root Treefolk. The second time you sacrifice a creature each turn, Coffin Root Treefolk gains trample until end of turn. So, this one is made to work with the Nulvir. The Nulvir are the aristocrats in green, white, black. If you're sacrificing things and triggering this to put counters on it, then, it's already a 2/4 for 3. The first counter is going to make it a 3/5 for 3, and then you're really going above rate pretty quickly. And then it's got the potential of hitting trample after you've been growing it for a long time, and that could make it a pretty significant threat. So if you're in the right archetype, I think this is a good card. Crack Bedrock. 2 green and 1 colorless. It is a common sorcery. Destroy target land. Straight up. Now tell me, do you really want to destroy lands forever? Land destruction is back, baby. Veldmar is a setting where the land is suffering, where things are difficult, life is hard, and there are all kinds of tough choices and counterbalances and tensions that are built into the set, and land destruction is one of them. So, nothing is safe, nothing is sacred, not even your precious land. Land destruction is back. Moving on. Desert Twister. I heard Strictly Better MTG, dev from The Place, his YouTube channel, he said that I feel like Desert Twister should have been a reprint that was in Outlaws of Thunder Junction. I agree with him. I know this is a little bit of a color pie break, but by the time you've gotten to 6 mana, you could have slapped like colorless up here. You could have said 6 generic mana, destroy target permanent, and no one would have batted an eye. There was that, what was it, a lesson that could like exile a non-land permanent for 5 or something. This one destroys lands, and it will cost 6. And there was an Eldrazi spell at 7 that was an instant that exiles a permanent. So I feel like letting green have this at 6 mana is no big deal. Desperate Elemental. This is a 3/3 for 4. It is a common elemental. When Desperate Elemental enters the battlefield, banish cards until you reveal 2 lands, then put those lands into your hand. So, this kind of ramps you after a fashion. It doesn't put them on the field, but getting lands into your hand and making sure you're hitting your land drops means you're gonna get from 4 to 6, and possibly beyond. So this is, it's a good value card, and it's also a good card for if you're in a go big type of deck. It does a lot of work. So you can't necessarily guarantee what colors of mana you're going to hit, but all the way around, there's a ton of value packed onto this card. It's going to be great in limited. might or might not get there in Constructed. Now for Constructed, this is Druid Reincarnator. It's 1 green for a 1/2 human druid. It is a rare. You can tap to add colorless. It also has the activated ability Sacrifice a creature. Add 1 mana of any color. This mana can only be spent to cast a creature spell or activate an ability of a creature. This ability may only be used once per turn. So, what was the card? Metamorphosis? Metamorphize, something like that. It was like 1 green, you sacrifice a creature, and then you add mana to your mana pool. It can only be used to play creature spells. Druid Reincarnator has a little tiny baby version of that, where you sacrifice a creature and you add 1 mana. Can only do that once per turn, but it also taps for mana, which means if you can get another creature out somehow, this can ramp you 2 mana in 1 turn instead of 1. It's hard to do. It's got, caveats for how you can use the mana. You have to sacrifice a creature to get the mana. So there's some hoops you have to jump through there. But this is a card I feel like could see play in Eternal formats if someone figures out just the right things to pair it with. It is a very strong card. And in draft, this would be pretty good with the Nulvir. Gives you another sacrifice outlet you can play more creature spells with, or activate abilities. So, all the way around, pretty cool card. Energy Synchronizer. This is a 5 mana artifact in green. It is a rare. Trash tokens you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color. This artifact also has tap, banish 1, sacrifice a trash token, draw a card. This is one of the big payoff cards if you're part of the Zarnik Collective. That's green, white, blue. They care about self-banish and trash tokens. This is the big payoff if you've been stockpiling trash tokens. If you could find a way to do enough of this, you could probably use this in Constructed, because of how much mana it's going to produce for you, and it gives you, card advantage as well. It's certainly going to be playable in Limited if you've been building up any number of trash tokens. So, good card to watch out for. It's a good build around. Fearsome Waste Runner. This is the green vanilla creature of the cycle. It's good. 2 green, 1 colorless. It is a 3/4 dinosaur for 3 mana. Now, green has all kinds of other, creatures that are rare or uncommon or whatever, or mythic, that are 3/4s for 3, or even 4/4s for 3, that have reach and trample, and they make map tokens, and all kinds of funky stuff. This one is just a 3/4 for 3. But it's a common. It's a good budget option if you're trying to do an early beatdown deck as a new player. It is also, if you can make double green early enough, going to be a good strong card in Limited. Now the double green stops it from being too strong, I think. It's enough of a commitment to green that if you don't hit it on turn 3, then the efficiency of being 3 mana doesn't matter as much. If you have to wait till turn 5 before you can play it. But still, it's not that many years ago that this would have been a head turner at this kind of cost. Right, wasn't there a card a while back that cost 3 green mana and it was a 4/5 vanilla creature? Right, this one's a little bit more splashable than that one, but it's not as big. Anyway. Germinate. 1 green, this is a common sorcery. Search your library for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield tapped with 2 stun counters, then shuffle. So you have to wait. The seed has to grow. It has to grow into the land, and then once it's blossomed, then you get access to it. I thought this was a neat way to be able to make a 1 mana land fetch spell that's still fair. right? You don't get access to it the next turn, the turn after that, but 2 turns, right? So on turn 4, if you played this on turn 1, on turn 4, the land is finally untapped and ready to use. Um, I think this is pretty fair with the stun counters. I'm curious how it plays, but I would love to get a chance to try it out and see. Gorgon Loner. We have a 4/4 uncommon for 5 mana in green. Gorgon Warrior. She's got Death Touch and Trample. That's it. But if you have never seen Death Touch and Trample together, if you don't know the rules interaction on that, Trample states that you just need to assign enough combat damage to a creature to assign it lethal damage. And Death Touch means that 1 point of damage is lethal. So for each creature that blocks the Gorgon Loner, she only has to assign 1 point of Death Touch to it. And if there's any left over, it just goes on to the opponent. So it's really hard to stop the damage coming to your face from a Death Touch Trampler. You can't leave this one for last. You need to trade with this creature while you still have hit points, life remaining. So, yeah, you know, she's not going to make it in constructed or anything, but this is a good combination of keywords. Do not underestimate what a Gorgon Loner can do. Grueling Search. 3 mana sorcery, uncommon. Banish 6, then choose a land card and a creature card from among the exiled cards and put them into your hand. There's been a lot of green cards like this over the years. Most of them will either be like mill 5 or look at the top 5, put the rest on the bottom in a random order, stuff like that. This one's into exile. It goes 6 cards deep, which is a little deeper than most of the other cards like this go. Most of them stop at 5 cards deep. I thought that the fact that it banishes is a pretty reasonable trade-off for looking a little bit deeper. You know, you're more likely to get the 2 hits off of this card, but those are also resources, the ones that you didn't get, they're just gone. Gone forever. So, it's a trade-off. I think this card's probably going to be pretty good. Doubt it'll be good enough for Constructed. Probably going to be a good role player in Limited. But I don't know how many copies of this you can run in a deck. You got to be a little cautious of milling yourself out. Hungry Worm. This is a 6 mana, 6/4 worm at common. It has reach and vigilance. A little bit of an ode to Crawl Worm. Now, you know, the original 6/4 for 6 green common. This one's better, of course. It's easier to splash. It's got reach and vigilance, but it's in this format, it's probably going to be a pretty good creature. The reach is particularly nice. The vigilance, yeah, depending on the board state, means you might be able to be pressuring the opponent, forcing trades out of them. You know, it's just kind of a fun creature to have hanging around the set. I think that cards like this are going to be better than normal because it's a slower format. Loyal Bodyguard. This is a 2/2 for a green and a colorless. Uncommon Elf Warrior. He's got Vigilance. And when Loyal Bodyguard dies, banish 1, then create a 1/1 white human creature token. And the flavor here is, you know, this person's been guarding the other person to where you can't even get at them or see them most of the time because of how good of a bodyguard they are. It's not until they are dead that the other person's left exposed. So this is a good card for aristocrats. That would be like the Nulvir, green, white, black. Not a bad 2-drop in general. Memory Keeper. This is a 6 mana 4/6 Giant Shaman, uncommon. She's got Vigilance and Ward 2. Whenever you exile a card from your library, you may choose a card in your hand or a permanent you control, then put the chosen card or permanent on the bottom of your library. So this harkens back to an old card from Mirrodin called Tel'Jallad Stylus. It's a 1 mana artifact where you can tap it and put a permanent you control on the bottom of your library. I always wished that that card could do cards in your hand as well, because sometimes if you're playing a combo deck, you really want the combo card to be in the library specifically to fetch up or hit, as opposed to drawing it where, you know, maybe it's 9 mana or whatever, and it just kind of sits and rots in your hand. It can't be part of the combo when it's in your hand. And this card in Limited, it can delay the inevitable, right? It only triggers when you're exiling cards from your library, but then it can give you the option of putting things back into your library. So if you're getting close to milling out, you could start, you know, tucking away some lands and some other things that you don't really need. Maybe you could even get some really long-term slow value out of like ETB triggers and stuff that you're putting back into your library. Maybe someday you shuffle it or you get to the bottom. So the value proposition of what this card does is extremely niche. But a 4/6 Vigilance with Ward 2 is a good battlefield presence. So it's a good playable card in Limited for sure. Paxdrad Guardians. We have a 3/5 for 4. It's an uncommon elf archer. And it has Reach and Ward Banish 3. So in order to target this thing, you've got to exile the top 3 cards of your library. And that's not hard to do. It doesn't cost you extra mana or anything. But you can see it says Paxdrad Guardians, and that means this is sneakily something that's meant to go with Paxdrad, the green, blue, black. You want to mill out the opponent. You know, you get this guy down, he's this annoying reach creature that's tough, and the opponent needs to get him out of the way. So at some point they probably target him and banish 3 cards, and that's playing into your strategy of milling them out. So it's a sneaky way for green to participate in banishing the opponent's library. Psionic Sabotage. This is a green and a colorless. It is a rare instant. Destroy target artifact, battle, enchantment, planeswalker, or non-basic land. That permanent's controller may banish cards until they reveal a basic land. If they do, they put it onto the battlefield. So this one took inspiration from the super annoying land, right? Boseiju from Neon Dynasty. This one is not a land, though. This one costs you a spell slot in your deck to run. So you can't just play it as a land. It's got some opportunity cost. Unlike that card, it blows up battles and planeswalkers. So that might seem strange, but way back at Lorwyn, when planeswalkers were first introduced, they were giving green planeswalker removal, right? Like destroy target non-creature permanent and stuff like that. They were ensuring that green had good answers and ways to remove a planeswalker. At some point they moved away from that. They decided that wasn't part of green's color pie, and now green not only has trouble dealing with creatures, it also has trouble dealing with planeswalkers. And sometimes green is good in the metagame. Green has been suffering a bit for a while. You can play it. There are playable green decks and things you can do in Standard right now, but we've been off of green for a few years at this point. I would like to see some strong tools come back into green's arsenal. And I feel like green shouldn't be quite so fragile to planeswalkers. And we already have Battle Destruction. One of the only cards that was in March of the Machine that directly referenced destroying battles was a green card. So um, I don't really feel like this is a color pie break. I feel like Planeswalkers are a permanent type that green probably needs access to destroying directly. Um, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So this is a good, strong, powerful card, but you can, if you're not cautious with it, you can ramp the opponent early, which could be a problem. Punish Pollution. This is a common, 3 mana instant in green. Target creature gains trample and gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of trash tokens on the battlefield. You gain X life. Notice that it says on the battlefield. That counts the opponent's trash tokens as well. Most modern Magic cards don't do this. They don't make symmetrical effects. They don't count the opponent's stuff anymore. But the flavor of this card is that it's punishing, the existence of all this trash. And for flavor reasons, it really feels like you ought to count the opponent's trash as well as your own. It's even a little weird that it synergizes with your own trash from a flavor perspective, but normally this would be pretty hard to use. Oh, you also gain X life. Normally this would be pretty hard to use, hard to get it up to a meaningful boost, unless you're going really all in on the trash tokens. But since there are so many trash tokens floating around incidentally, it's not impossible that the opponent could have a couple just laying around. And this spell can capitalize on that. So this is kind of meant for green, white, blue. Those are the Zarnik collective. This is really for them. But if you happen to have a bunch of trash in the deck for some reason, maybe you can get a big pump and win the game out of nowhere. Quel'Nai Botanist. This is a 2/3 for 3. It's an uncommon human shaman. Whenever you draw a card, if it is a land, you may reveal it. If you do, you gain 1 life. This card, I know it could be a little bit annoying in paper, potentially. Maybe it won't be good enough to see play most of the time in paper, but basically as you're drawing cards, there's a chance that you could reveal them kind of like a miracle, I guess. And if it's a land, then this triggers to gain a life. That's it. It could be pretty good. There are ways to draw a lot of cards, especially in like the Eternal formats and such. So this card may be better than I think it is. But it's not bad in Limited. Just naturally drawing cards, you're going to gain some amount of life off of this if it lives. So this is probably going to be better than it looks, is what I'm saying. Quel'Nai Security. This is a 5/5 giant archer for 4 mana. It's a rare. He has reach and vigilance. Whenever Quel'Nai Security becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card and put a +1/+1 counter on Quel'Nai Security. So this has got kind of the Cactarantula text on it, but it also gets bigger. So if the opponent isn't killing it, if they're just like tapping it, putting stun counters on it, or enchanting it with an aura or whatever, and then you manage to get it back from that somehow later, it will be bigger. The opponent will have made a terrible, terrible mistake. It's pretty efficiently statted as a 5/5 reach vigilance for 4. So Constructed has a bunch of cards kind of in this vein, so I don't know that this one gets there, but having this ability that's almost kind of like a ward it doesn't stop the opponent from targeting it, it just punishes the opponent for targeting it. Um, could be pretty good. It's going to definitely be a great card in Limited. It's maybe on the cusp of playability for Constructed. Renewal, this one is a reprint from Homelands. Yes, Homelands. Costs a green and 2 colorless. It is a common sorcery. You sacrifice a land, search for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield. That's untapped, by the way, and then shuffle. Draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. Well, in this set, drawing a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep is normal. It is something I've embraced across a number of cards of the set, so this one doesn't look out of place. And, this isn't probably going to do anything in Constructed, but it lets you shuffle your lands around and get, like, marginal advantages. You get to, you've gotten, like, 3 forests, and you need to get to your, like, splash colors and stuff. This will do it. Puts land into your graveyard, replaces itself with a card. There's a lot that this card does to just kind of smooth things out in Limited. That at the time it was first printed in Homelands, I doubt that people were spending much time admiring the subtleties of this card for like a limited environment. The only limited environment Homelands has ever played in was sealed. But this card, I feel like, is actually just a good workhorse, a good solid workhorse of a card for like a modern limited kind of environment. Fixes your mana and replaces itself, and maybe you can even use the untapped land that same turn. So maybe it's not even costing you the full 3 mana. I think this card's actually pretty worthy of seeing a reprint. I'm happy to have it here. Roka Automated Triage. This is a 4 mana instant in green. It's an uncommon. You create a blood token and a 1/1 colorless construct artifact creature token. Then you gain life equal to the number of artifacts you control. Weird. Yes, it's weird. It's a green card that synergizes with artifacts. There's a little bit of precedent. There have been some cards in some recent sets, like Ginger Brood and some other things I could name, that actually synergize with artifacts. It's not unheard of. So, Roka has this Artifacts Matters theme, and this is a card that can both pay you off for controlling a bunch of artifacts, right? You gain a bunch of life, and it also makes 2 artifacts for you, so it's turning on your other cards that care about artifacts. So this is just a helper piece for that kind of Roka deck in the format. Other decks could play it and get some marginal value and utility out of it, but it's probably going to be at its best in the archetype it's meant for. Roka Might. This is an enchantment for 2 mana. It is rare. Creatures you control get +1/+0. If you control 3 or more artifacts, they also gain Vigilance. If you control 6 or more artifacts, they also gain Trample. If you control 9 or more artifacts, they also gain Ward 1. It's a lot to expect to get 9 artifacts out, but if you did, this card would be punching above its mana cost, for sure. If it's actually giving +1/+0 Vigilance, Trample, and Ward 1, that's a lot for 2 mana to give to all of your creatures. But even at the baseline, at the most minimum, it's an enchantment that gives +1 power. And that is enough to turn the math of combat, and something that an aggressive deck might consider at the 2 mana spot, even in Constructed. So, I think this card's not just, like a super synergy piece, meme kind of a card, I think this card could do some real work. Rubble Maker. This is a 3/3 for 3 Orc Shaman. He's a common. He has trample. You can pay 1 and sacrifice Rubble Maker. You destroy target artifact or enchantment. When you do, create a trash token. So, there's some cross synergies going on a little bit here. The sacrifice thing is cross synergizing with Nulvir, right? Green, white, black. The trash token is cross synergizing into things like Roka and Zarnik and other stuff. And a 3/3 Trampler for 3 is also just a good playable card, so this is just a really solid common in the set. There are a number of artifacts and enchantments you want to blow up, so I think this card is going to probably overperform for you. Be one of the better green commons of the set. Scars of Violence. So this is a green and a colorless. It's an instant, common. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. Banish 2. That means you exile the top 2 of your library. And I think you get the flavor of the card. It's that, these past battles, past atrocities have left a scar on you. That scar you carry is the banished cards. Otherwise, this is just your basic bite effect. And 2 mana instant speed. Bite effect is going to be playable and limited. It's going to be a good card. Spent Druid. This is a 1/1 for 1 green. It is a common elf druid. Tap, banish 4, add 1 mana of any color. So, similar to the red pinger we saw that had a banish 7 activation, this one is a 1 mana ramp piece, not unlike Birds of Paradise or whatever. But you have to banish 4 cards every time you use her. And that can add up pretty quickly. Usually the turn 1 mana dork that you play ends up, if the opponent can't kill it, you end up using it like every turn for like the first 5 turns of the game, and that would be like 20 cards that you're banishing. It adds up. So does it add up enough? Or is it just going to be like immediately adopted everywhere and constructed? We'll see. Maybe we won't see because this is a set I made up. Maybe no one will ever play with it, but I hope so. Hope someone does. And you can get back to me and tell me if this banish cost was high enough or too low. Stonestalker. We have a mythic. This is a green and 2 colorless. It's a 3/4 Gorgon Warlock. She has Death Touch and Trample. Again, something the Gorgons are good at in this setting. Whenever Stonestalker deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, you draw a card. And green has had this effect before on like Oran Viper and some other things. The neat thing about Stonestalker is that a 3/4 Death Touch Trampler is a heck of a thing to swing in with. Because of the interaction of Death Touch and Trample, the opponent would have to put 3 creatures in front of this to actually stop it from hitting their face or hitting their planeswalker. Otherwise, some amount's going to trample over and you're going to draw that card. So, trying to stop this just with combat is really painful. Maybe they've got like a 4 power thing and they can trade with it, but you've killed off their creature and drawn a card in the process, and that's just not a very good exchange for them. So, I feel like this card is good. It's a little bit hard to tell without actually playing, but I feel like this card is good, and it's going to be the kind of thing that you really need to kill. Really need to find a removal spell and get rid of this thing. because it's really hard to tangle with it with your creatures. Thrashing Worm. We have a 7/4 for 7 mana, 2 green, 5 colorless. It's an uncommon worm. When Thrashing Worm enters the battlefield, banish 1, then it deals damage equal to its power to up to 1 target battle creature or planeswalker. And yes, this is green removal. We already had Desert Twister at 6, destroying a permanent. So comparatively, this is close to the same. Most things can't take 7 damage and survive. It also leaves you with a worm on the battlefield. That's a nice benefit compared to Desert Twister. But by the time you've gotten to 7 mana, I feel like this is a pretty fair effect for green to have. Green does have creatures like this already. They've been a little cautious about how they've printed them up to this point. But I think once you've reached like 7 and higher mana, that stuff like this is probably pretty fair to do. I think if you put this on like a 5-drop or something that was super efficient and it did this effect, that would be more problematic than a 7-drop. Towering Cactus Beast. Speaking of 7-drops, we've got 2 green, 5 colorless, 7/7 Plant Horror with Reach. It's a common. And when Towering Cactus Beast dies, create 2 food tokens. So this can play into sacrifice themes. It can play into artifact matters themes like Roka. It's just a giant creature with reach. Those are usually pretty good in limited. So all the way around, I think this is going to be a useful card for you. Ulthrak Ambition. This is a green sorcery, costs a green and a colorless. It's an uncommon. Banish cards until you reveal a land, and put that land onto the battlefield tapped. If you also banished 1 or more creature cards with mana cost 6 or more, put one of those cards into your hand. So the land is a guarantee. You will hit the next land in sequence, which is similar to, what is it? Open the Omen Paths? Omen Path Journey? The one from Aftermath? Similar to that one, finds the next land in your library. But if one of the cards you happened to exile on your way to your next land was a creature with mana cost 6 or more, you can draw 2. Most of the time, this is like a Rampant Growth with less selection. But it can hit non-basics. Once in a while, it's also going to draw you a giant creature. So does that make it worth it? Probably. Rampant Growth is a playable spell. So Rampant Growth with occasional upside? Yeah. Yeah, that's playable. Wasteland Adapter. We have a 2/1 Lizard for 2 mana. That's common. Wasteland Adapter gets +1/+2 as long as you control a land named Wastes or Snow-Covered Wastes. So you get a 3/3 Lizard for 2 if you've got a Waste. That's still not good enough quite for Constructed. Like, 3/3s for 2 are really, really on the edge right now. In terms of ones that don't have a lot of relevant abilities and stuff. 3/3s for 2 are like really close to being good playables. I think sometimes it fits the deck and it's worth including, and sometimes it isn't. This might not get there in Constructed, but it's like right on the cusp. And for limited, if you can actually hit the wastes early to where this can be attacking as a 3/3 early in the game, you could have the surprise aggressive start that the opponent's just not ready for. That'd be kind of cool. Wasteland Spider. This is a 1/3 spider for 2. It's an uncommon. It has reach. As long as you control a land named Wastes or Snow-Covered Wastes, Wasteland Spider gets Death Touch. That is a great upgrade. It changes from a pretty lackluster creature into a fantastic creature. So controlling the waste in this case is a giant difference between having Death Touch or not. So if you got it, the spider is going to be amazing. Worm Shaper, this is a rare. 6 mana, green and 5. I have a 4/4 Elf Artificer with Reach. When Worm Shaper enters the battlefield, create a 6/6 colorless worm artifact creature token with Trample. And you can sacrifice 3 artifacts, and target worm you control gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. It doesn't have to target an artifact worm, it can be any worm. So most of the value that you got from this card was initially playing it and getting the 4/4 with Reach and a 6/6 with Trample. If you ever manage to use the second mode, where you save one of your worms with hexproof and indestructible, that's extra icing. That's gravy on top. But it could come up. Cards like this are sometimes playable in Standard. We already have some, good value 6-drops that don't see a lot of play. There's like the one that makes 2 wolves, and then it becomes ridiculous when it flips to nighttime. It also puts out 10 power and toughness for 6 mana, and that one sees basically no play. Is this one better? Maybe. It's going to be great in Limited. It's going to be like a total bomb in Limited. Like, not quite as much as Bonnie Paul maybe, but, right up there. And the last card we've got for green is Zarnik Solutions. So this is a 1 green enchantment. It's an uncommon. Whenever a trash token you control causes 1 or more lands to enter your graveyard, return one of those lands to your hand. So the basic idea here is if you activate a trash token, you mill or surveil over a land. This lets you pull it back. So you're netting extra value and card advantage off of those trash token activations. And that's pretty neat. So it's just a fun value piece that you can put into a trash token deck. You don't really run this unless you've got a bunch of synergy. Could be more of a constructed card than a limited card, but it could be fun to get this going in limited. And that wraps us up for green. So join me next time when we're going to be looking at multicolor. Definitely some of the exciting, spicy stuff of the set. You can see all the big, overpowered spells of the Consortium, full of decadence and hubris. And the other factions have a bunch of great stuff going on too. It's a really fun section of cards to look at. Colorless has got a bunch of neat stuff going on as well. And then lands. Probably will be part of Colorless. So, until then, like and subscribe. Check out my other videos. Helps out the channel. And never stop honing your critical thinking and empathy.